And I recently had the privilege of speaking with Dean Jemy Gatdula, one of the Philippines' leading experts in international law and foreign relations. He's the Dean of the Institute of Law at the University of Asia and the Pacific and a Senior Fellow of the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations. As the former head of PricewaterhouseCoopers World Trade Management Services for both Philippines and Indonesia, he has advised multinational corporations, international organizations and governments, including ASEAN, WTO, and OECD. And currently a Senior Fellow of the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations, Dean Gatdula has been a trusted voice on matters of international law. Now, Mr. Gatdula shared his insights on how the upcoming U.S. presidential election might impact U.S.-Philippine relations. In our discussion, we explored implications for defense, treaties, security partnerships, and the delicate balance of Philippines' relations with both the U.S. and China. Here's my conversation with Dean Gatdula. All right. Sir Jemy, welcome to the program. I'll start with my question. How might a Trump or Harris administration approach the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty and associated military exercises operations? Do you think there will be potential changes to U.S. security assistance, counterterrorism support, or maritime domain awareness efforts in the Philippines?
Well, I like to think that there could be more aggressive changes, particularly with the Trump White House. There has been a declared pivot to Asia during the Obama years, which unfortunately has not been really fulfilled much, even during at the time pa lang ni Obama. Biden, of course, has not been very, how should I put it, conscious of the needs of the area during his presidency. But I think with a Trump presidency, there is a more conscious awareness of the risk and dangers of a dominant China in the region. And so it is more possible that we could have a more perhaps aggressive, perhaps more overt assertion of U.S. military presence if, for example, Trump does win the White House this week.
What about a Harris presidency?
Well, then we'll probably be looking at more of the same as what we've seen from the Biden years. I think there is a more greater tendency for the administration to try to be more conciliatory to China, which I believe is a bit of a mistake. And also because of the fact that the policy that the Harris administration will probably do is to continue the Biden administration's policy of engaging more with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And that would probably drain, if not over clearly your resources, but also the focus and the focus and the concentration of the Americans away from this area. I think what I've seen, that I've heard, that I like with regard to the Trump pronouncements is that they were willing to try to put an end, a peaceful end to the Russia-Ukraine dispute. And by doing so, it will allow the administration, the American government, to put its focus elsewhere, and hopefully that would be in Asia, where I think the American presence is sorely needed.
What about potential changes to U.S. assistance, counterterrorism support, maritime domain awareness efforts in the Philippines?
Well, I think we have a very good idea of the changes that could happen, assuming that Trump wins, because we already had an experience with the first Trump administration. And so it has been always touted, the fact that Trump always wants to make a good deal. So, and famously, Trump got along with President Duterte.
Yes.
And I don't see any reason why President Trump will not get along with the President Marcos. I think the President our present administration is quite more consistent in its relations with the U.S., and it's something that I think President Trump will appreciate. There are comments made to the effect that Trump, being a negotiator at heart, being a businessman at heart, may probably come to a deal with China that will, in the end, be hurtful, perhaps for the Philippines. But I don't see that happening. I think there are certain underlying values that still bind the Philippines and the Americans together. And Trump, despite all of that, I think will be looking to his legacy. This will be obviously his last period to be in office, and he will be very conscious of the effect that he will have on history. And right now, whether we like it or not, the Philippines is in a quite historic position at this time in world history.
And implications for the Philippines balancing act between the U.S. and China on a Harris and Trump presidency.
Again, I mean, I don't want to put all the benefits that I'm saying right now towards Trump. But
Yes.
it arises from a certain belief of mine that in order for us to have a very good balancing act with China, as you put it, it requires a certain strength on the part of the Philippines. I think in all the observations I've had and study that I've made with regard to China, it is not the rule of law. It is not the exercise of diplomacy. It is not the exercise of showing respect or deference to China that gets their attention. It is the ability of our government to be able to exercise strength and also to be able to demonstrate that if need be, we will fight for our rights. That, I think, is what will gain the respect of China. And for us to be able to come to a good balancing act between China and the U.S., what is needed is a very consistent, very declared foreign policy that is hinging on our values as a nation. And I repeat that. I mean, people have been quite overly pragmatic in the way they formulate their foreign policy calculations. But deep down, I think it all also will boil down to the values of our country. The moment that we adhere consistently to our democratic Republican values, yes, it will in a way serve as a good our relationship with the U.S. Now, with regard to the commercial aspects of foreign policy, of course, I do accept that there is such a thing, but ultimately, that commercial aspect will also be hinging on how strong we are in advancing our values. So this is not merely an economic cost benefit analysis of which some other people think foreign policy is, but it really goes far beyond that. So if we are very clear in what our established purpose is, then everything follows from there. And I think it's very clear naman what our established purpose is, and that's found in the Constitution. So as long as we meet the goals of what the Constitution states, and if we are of the belief that the Constitution embodies our aspirations and ideals, the rest follows that from there. The problem of not having a very defined compass, of being too practical daw or being too pragmatic, is that we become mercenarial. And the Chinese obviously would know that. And that is why we are in a mess right now, because I think that was in a way, the certain thrust of the foreign policy a few years ago.
Now, talking about policies, let's talk about economic policies. Are there concerns about U.S. economic policies such as trade or investment changing depending on who wins the election?
Well, that's one area now we should be a little bit more watchful about, because of the fact that the Trump-Vance tandem has been planning to cut down back on trade, and also with regard to the idea of bringing a lot of the business back to the U.S. Now, obviously, if you're American, that is something you want to hear. That is something you also want to hear if our president says that. So it's something I cannot, how should I put it, take against the Americans if they do decide to do that, because I would like to hear my own president say those same things, to be able to protect our own manufacturing, our own agriculture, our own workers. And so we'll just have to be able to make our business environment incredibly more attractive. Now, there is a very good and strong motivation for us to decouple economically from China, and there is a good security need for, and which even Taiwan admits is there, for companies to, or countries to be able to also serve as a good alternative to Taiwan, particularly with regard to electronics and semiconductors and so on. And so it is up to us now to make our business environment attractive for all those countries that would seek to decouple from China and to present itself as viable alternatives to Taiwan. Unfortunately, so far, Vietnam, I think, has been overtaking us or outpacing us in this regard. But there's no reason why we can't turn around and do a better job at it.
So now, when it comes to U.S.-led alliances, how could this election outcome influence these alliances, this U.S.-led alliance, such as the Quad, U.S. partnerships with ASEAN here in Asia?
Well, it's really hard to say. With the Harris administration, I think it's going to be a little bit more on the same track that we have seen with regard to the Biden administration. People have been lauding the Biden administration for a more nuanced foreign policy. The thing is that it's too nuanced that even I cannot understand what it is.
Okay.
So, but kasi I look at it purely from the Philippine viewpoint.
Yes.
And so, for me, even if, for example, it might benefit Europe, the alliances that you're talking about that the US may want to engage in, but in the end, ultimately for me, how does it help the Philippines? If, for example, a Trump administration decides to de-emphasize NATO and emphasize the fact that NATO countries should do more in defending Europe rather than rely on the US, for me, okay, fine, because it will allow more US resources and more US attention to be placed into our area of the world. So while it may not something be positive that you could read, for example, in most of the newspapers that you will see, that Trump now will be a little bit more unstable in other areas of the world, let's say Middle East or Europe. For me, okay, fine, doesn't really matter. What I'm concerned about is how the Americans will be helping us here in the Philippines in being able for us to protect ourselves against China.
What do you want to leave the audience regarding implications of the U.S. election for our country?
Ultimately, it would be good to have a president that is there that well, there's really no perfect politician. We know that.
Yes.
But there's also an American politician who once said, and it was Franklin Roosevelt, and he was talking about another national leader, another world leader, and in essence, his message was, now he may be a bastard, but at least he's our bastard. And that's what I'd like to think about other foreign leaders as far as the Philippines is concerned. There may be other countries out there, other national leaders that we find distasteful or obnoxious or irritating, but at least he's ours. And at least that leader is someone that we can rely on. But ultimately, having used the word rely, we'll just have to play whoever the US president is that happens to be elected in this week. Because in the end, it will just have to be the Filipinos that have to rely on themselves. If we will place our hopes on another country, that's not the national way of going about things. We need to be able to establish our own military defenses. We need to be able to strengthen our own military capabilities. We have a country that essentially is incredibly young. We have a country that's almost, 23-25% average years old, average age, which is a far more superior position than you can see in China, which is around 35 plus, or even in the US, 33 plus years of age. So we have, in terms of the economy, in terms of national security, in terms of vibrancy of a country, our country is far more better positioned in the coming years than many other countries that are out there. So we should stop looking at them and try and not rely on them. If they give help, great. If they don't give help, that's okay, because we can do it on our own. And I think that's the mentality. I mean, perhaps there might be situations na we cannot do it on our own, but yung nasabi nila, fake it till you make it. And besides, why will another country decide to help us if we ourselves do not believe in ourselves? Diba? It's like helping another person na in the end, iwawalgas din naman niya, because that country itself does not believe in its own ability to move forward. So, you're asking for final words for our countrymen, and my words are essentially, okay, let's see what happens as far as the U.S. is concerned, but ultimately it's their country. As far as we are concerned, we work for our country and we do what's best for us.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much for your insights.
Yes, thank you, Alma. It's a pleasure.